Ladies and gentlemen, I'm PB Arcadia. Today is a dark day in video game preservation history. I'm going to cover the news here and exactly what happened and why this is really bad for emulators and retro games being preserved in general, even in the official capacity. Before we get started on the lugubriousness of this all, please consider giving the channel a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Either one of them helps my videos, helps the channel grow. Thank you. So basically today we're going to be taking a look at what the US Copyright Office did with the DMCA review, and that's the Digital Millennial Copyright Act that's been around in place for so long. Basically, there was an extension in the DMCA that allowed old retro video games that are out of print to be shared through archives. This is why the Internet Archive could legally share old games from decades ago, up until even, the PlayStation and 2 and the Xbox, the original Xbox. The Internet Archive has all of these games saved onto their database. Now, what's happening today is the US Copyright Office here denied or refused an extension for this provision here to allow these retro games to be shared legally. And that is really, really awful for emulators and backing up your games in general, even if you do it legally, which you should. We're going to take a look at an article written today by the Video Game History Foundation and dig into the weeds a little bit and see exactly what's going on. Okay, so we have the article here, Statement on the DMCA 2024 Triennial Review Ruling. And we have the article down here. I'll make it a little bit bigger. Get started here. So, the U.S. Copyright Office announced today that they would not grant a new exemption in the Digital Millennium Copyright Act in support of video game preservation. For the past 3 years, the Video Game History Foundation has been supporting with the Software Preservation Network on a petition to allow libraries and archives to remotely share digital access out of print games in their collection. This is what I was talking about when we were just discussing the Internet Archive hosting these games. So, continuing. Under the current anti-circumvention rules in Section 1201 of the DMCA, libraries and archives are unable to break copy protections on games in order to make them remotely accessible to researchers. While we are disappointed by the Copyright Office decision, we have no regrets about going through this process. Over the last 3 years, working on the petition has helped us generate important research, notably our Survey of the Video Games Reissue Market in the United States report, which proves that around 87% of games released in the United States before 2010 remain out of print. Our combined efforts with the SPN have raised significant public awareness of these issues and have already made an impact throughout the game industry and preservation communities. Unfortunately, lobbying efforts by rights holder groups continue to hold back progress. During our hearing with the Copyright Office, the Entertainment Software Association declared that they would never support remote game access for research purposes under any conditions. The game industry's absolutist position, which the ESA's own members have declined to go on the record to support, forces researchers to explore extra legal methods to access the vast majority of these out-of-print video games that are otherwise unavailable. We're not done fighting here. We will continue our advocacy for greater access and legal allowances for video game preservation and working with members of the game industry to increase internal awareness around these issues. We encourage members of the game industry who are disappointed by the Copyright Office's decision to ask their leadership to push for greater support for the work of libraries and archives within their industry groups. So really this is just a can of worms that has been opened, and there's a lot of repercussions that could come from this, especially from companies like Nintendo, who are so litigious and will try and use any law in the book to get their way no matter what. And this comes in a time where games are starting to become digital only. We are seeing in real time that consoles are becoming digital only, and you only have the illusion of a disc now anyway. It's not like whenever you put the game in the console, you have to download like 10 different updates that are like, 100 gigabytes. It'll take your entire storage drive up on your console. It's not the same anymore. It's not like where you have the entire game on the cartridge. Some games still are fully on the disc, but it's so rare now. This is why you see people wanting physical disc-based games for the rest of time. Because whenever these games that come out digital only, you only own the license to that game at that point. You never actually own the game. Once the servers shut down, and it could be years from now, from the PS5 server shut down, or like the Xbox Live whatever server shut down, once those services are gone, so are your games. You cannot legally go back and re-download them if the servers are down. How do you play the games that you bought? Well, the tough reality here is that you actually don't own the games. That's just how it is. And that's terrible for video game preservation. And we are seeing it in a world where everything else is being preserved. Art's being preserved, music, movies. It's come to the point where we're actually reversing here. Video games were considered to be a preserved form of media, but the U.S. Copyright Office just said, F that. They're not real art or anything like that. You have to deal with this. You can't go and, find these games anywhere else. And that's the thing is, like I said, we're going backwards. We used to have a system on the Wii back in 2006, Virtual Console. You could go and buy the games that you wanted to buy individually and own them on your console, as long as that console worked. You didn't need a license. You could still turn on your Wii or your Wii U and go play those Virtual Console games. Even though the services are down, you can't go re-download them, but you still own them on the console. This is also at a time where we have like the CEO of Ubisoft who basically just said, get used to not owning your games. And I think that just about every CEO in the industry thinks that now, including Valve, including Steam. The only organization that I can think of that doesn't operate by that logic is goodoldgames.com. They don't have any kind of DRM or anything. You just buy the game, you get the executable, and it works. So I think that we are going so far backwards, and video game culture in general at the top. I'm not talking about indie games. I'm talking about like the AAA developers and publishers, especially the publishers, which are getting real cozy into selling you licenses instead of actual games. And it used to not be that way. It used to be an industry where the video game came first, it was an art, and it was something to be sold to you for you to keep for the rest of your life, and you can enjoy it and pass it on to your kids or whatever. It doesn't matter what you do with that game. But now we're going to digital only, and it's looking pretty bad. Anyway, that's today's news. Very bad for emulators, very bad for legal game backups, very bad for researching purposes, very bad for video game preservation of art in general. I honestly don't know how you could be against preserving art like this, especially games. Usually when I make an emulator video, and only really on Nintendo emulators, when I made my Switch emulator video, I got a comment saying they said emulators let you play The Legend of Zelda whenever it leaked, Well, that's not the emulator's problem. Whenever you download Ryujinx, it doesn't come with the ROM, with the Zelda ROM. It doesn't come with leaked games. That's Nintendo's fault for letting the thing leak in the first place. And all the while, you could still play those leaked games on real hardware with MIG switches and whatnot. So usually, all the naysayers, what people siding with the big corporations on this, especially Nintendo, usually are just like uninformed kids. So I hope that they understand eventually what's really happening and stop licking Nintendo's boot.